radical left has taken over the Democratic Party.
Hello and welcome to Think Progressively, covering politics and all the other chaos life has to offer. This is episode 11, recorded on Wednesday, October 28th from Milwaukee. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jason.
And on today's episode, there is less than 1 week until the election.
Yay. Everybody, I think at this point, if you have a mail-in ballot, don't mail it in anymore. Either go drop it off or just vote in person.
Just vote in person. Go vote. Vote for Joe Biden a million times. Vote for Joe Biden. Vote for Joe Biden. We also have special guest Seth Andrews on to discuss his new book, Confessions of a Fox News Christian. But first, the headlines.
Fake news.
Fake news.
Fake, disgusting news.
Up first, there is less than 1 week until the election. Go vote.
Go vote.
But besides that, we had the final Trump and Biden debate.
A little bit more tame, I would say.
I mean, it wasn't unwatchable.
You could actually hear what people were saying. I think that does, again, still benefit Biden, where he actually has policy to talk about. I don't think it benefits Trump to get into that kind of civil discussion because that's not his game. He wants to make fun of the other person. He only works if he can react to what the other person is saying, and it's a lot harder when you have an actual moderated debate.
I was reading a New York Times article after the debate, and I think the headline summed it up perfectly. The only thing worse than an unwatchable debate for Trump is a watchable one. He was awful. Like, oh my God. Even though, yes, he was more tame, he was lying like every 2 seconds.
How'd you like the part where he said that the only people that come to their asylum hearing are ones that don't have the highest IQs?
Oh, I was like literally screaming at my TV.
Yep, my TV got yelled at that point as well.
God. For those who don't know, who didn't watch the debate, first off, good job. You missed probably a potential aneurysm. But in a topic about immigration, Trump was talking about asylum seekers and how bad supposedly the catch and release program was under the Obama administration, where he was saying that people who go back for their asylum court dates were the ones with the lowest IQ because they could have just easily walked right into our country.
And he said that 95% of them don't show up, which is not true at all.
Well, and I loved his preface to it. He's like, well, I'm not going to say it. No, I will. Like, he had some, like, weird, like...
It's like, I know it's super racist and terrible for me to say this, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Here we go.
And according to humanrightsfirst.org, in an analysis of asylum claims between 2013 and 2017, 92% of individuals who filed for asylum attended their court hearings in those years.
So 92% of those people...
Not 5%.
Are the lowest IQ people ever.
Pretty much.
I mean, he didn't even dial back the crazy uncle stuff for this election. I mean, let's look at COVID, or when they were discussing COVID at the beginning of the election. He's still claiming that he did such a great job handling COVID crisis, and they're now using those stupid freaking models. I don't want to say that they're stupid, where they're saying, well, it could have been 2.2 million people who died, but we only got it down to 200,000, so A for effort?
So he takes credit for the 2 million people that didn't die, when the federal government has done nothing to try to prevent the spread of COVID. And in fact, the people that get the credit for 2 million people not dying should be the doctors and the frontline workers and all of the people that are actually taking this seriously and staying home as much as they can, wearing masks, social distancing. Those are the ones responsible for 2 million people not dying, not the federal government, which has done absolutely nothing.
But even look at what the White House did the other day, where they tried to take credit for quote-unquote ending the COVID pandemic. They tried listing it as one of the top accomplishments for Trump in his first term.
Meanwhile, you've got his chief of staff, Mark Meadows, going on CNN saying that they're not going to control the pandemic. Basically, just surrendering.
Right. And he basically just said, yeah, I mean, there's nothing really we can do.
All we can do is treat the people that get sick and bury the people that die. We're not going to do anything to try to control it. And basically he was like, yeah, it's impossible to control it. It's not. You look at what other countries are doing. They're doing a much better job. Meanwhile, here in the U.S., we had the worst week we've had since July.
And I'm pretty sure I said this last week, but I want to bring it up again because it makes me so angry. When Trump or anyone else in his administration tries to bring up the fact that 2.2 million people were predicted to die of coronavirus, but only 200-some thousand people actually died, that's not a good thing. They get no credit for that because it was them who initially used those findings to undermine the authority of the CDC and other scientific departments, saying they didn't know what they were talking about. It was their fault why this is as bad as it is today. So don't tell me that it could have been so much worse because you actively made it much worse than what it was. And did you see the exchange where Biden was trying to get Trump to say or admit that he didn't take any responsibility for it and then admitted he took full responsibility for it?
And then blame China.
And then immediately blamed China in the next sentence.
I take full responsibility. It's not my fault.
It's all China's fault.
Yeah, that's how you want to take responsibility. The next words out of your mouth, it's not my fault.
I mean, Trump triggers so easily, though.
He's the typical bully. You saw it, the 60 Minutes interview, when he does not respond well to anyone pressuring him. He tries to be, the big bad tough guy, insults everybody, yells at everybody, but the minute anybody asks him questions that he finds difficult, even though, again, he is the president of the United States, he can't handle it. You're against me, and leaves, walks away.
Well, did you see him in the debate where he tried to brag to Joe Biden saying, well, I could have raised so much more money than you did?
Yeah, I thought he was supposed to be the deal maker.
But even then, what is that? Why is that something you want to say to the national people during a pandemic?
Yeah, it's just his normal ego stuff. Well, you raised more money than I did, so I have to mention that and say that I could have raised more money than you if I wanted to. So the one thing I saw the next day after the debate is a lot of people pushing Biden and making him kind of clarify his statements on energy and on ending
the oil industry, basically.
Well, our reliance on oil and fracking and all that. And what he said during the debate is that, yes, we do need to transition away from oil. And that's apparently a gotcha, that the finite, non-renewable resource is going to run out and we should probably start to transition away from it now. I don't see how that is anything controversial. Even the oil companies spend billions of dollars looking for alternative fuel sources and renewable energy. So they know it. It's not anything radical or socialist. It's just a reality. There's only so much oil in the earth that we're going to be able to extract. And the closer we get to that running out, the more expensive it's going to be. And that's just even ignoring the fact that we might be killing our environment by burning oil. It's just not an infinite supply. And we have to figure out a way to get around that. And Joe Biden's plan says that by 2050, the U.S. would be completely non-reliant on oil, which I feel is too long, but at least it's something. And that is apparently crazy, and he shouldn't be president because of that stance.
And see, I think that's where I would consider it a mistake. Not a big one, but one nonetheless. It's not that I disagree with what he said. I think it's how he presented the idea was poor. And I mean, I may even make the argument that he got baited by Trump. This was at the end of the debate. Biden was exhausted. Trump was still being stupid as all, ever. And Trump was trying to get him to say that he was going to take away the oil industry or he was going to, stop the oil industry or whatever he was saying. And Biden said, yeah, I am, because he was just done with it, right? The problem is once you do that, there's the soundbite. There's the clip. And then even though you can explain it afterwards, you already shut everyone off. And I mean, you can see that Trump tried to do that too. Like even when Biden was trying to explain his position, you just saw Trump kind of raise his hands and be like, oh, well, I mean, you said it, so who cares at this point, right? It doesn't matter. You gave away the game. Because at the end of the day, in politics, when you're explaining, you're losing. And that's what really sucks about it. Because even though Democrats usually have really good answers, they're really long and complicated answers that people don't care to listen to. So even though he's trying to explain his position, which is perfectly fine, by the way, now it looks like he's backpedaling. It looks like he is treating it like it's a mistake. And it looks like he let the game go by or something, or he gave away the game, even though he actually didn't. So that's my only big thing is that, and let's be real here, usually unless you have a hardcore conservative voter who's already going to vote for Trump, no one's going to care about this. You may have someone who's like working for the oil and gas industry who may be concerned about losing their job. But usually when Biden talks about stopping reliance on oil, he usually goes right into his new economic plan, which usually goes right into his new environmental plan at the same time. And he marries those two together, which is really good. I just think he could have not been baited so easily at the end of the debate.
We also got to hear Trump's line again saying that he's done more for the black community in America than any other president with the possible. I like how he even throws the caveat in there that maybe not. Than Abraham Lincoln. And that is, of course, ignoring the many things that have been done by other presidents like Lyndon Johnson with
like the Civil Rights Act.
The Civil Rights Act, yeah.
Are you serious?
He's willing to concede Abraham Lincoln with the Emancipation Proclamation, but everybody else, definitely he's done more. I can't believe that he keeps saying that personally.
I mean,
I'm sure someone has told him, right?
No, I don't think anyone's actually told him, or anyone like in his circle has actually told him that. Because again, he is the crazy drunk uncle that no one actually wants to talk to. That's the thing. So yes, they all just deal with it. They look the other way. It's like, yeah, Uncle Don just says crazy stuff sometimes. That's just our Uncle Don. That's all it is. No one challenges him because they don't want to deal with him.
I even saw Jared Kushner on Fox News saying, one thing we've seen in a lot of the black community, which is mostly Democrat, is that President Trump's policies are the policies that can help people break out of the problems that they're complaining about. But he can't want them to be successful more than they want to be successful. So there you go.
You gotta be kidding me.
That's the only problems with the black community is they just don't want it enough.
Well, let's also not forget the fact that he literally said, I'm the least racist person in this room while he was on stage, while talking to a woman of color who was moderating the debate. Let that sink in.
And he had some weird line about, well, I can't even see everybody in here. It's super
I can't
dark.
see you all because it's really dark in here, but I know for a fact I'm the least racist. So what does that even have to mean?
I don't know.
Like, was he assuming that, well, if there were a bunch of black people in there, like, I guess they may be more, or at least racist than I was, but, I'm going to double down anyway.
He's like, well, I know Melania's here, and she's super racist, so that's one for sure.
But he literally said that to a woman of color.
Yeah, he doesn't care. That's, again, his lies, the best, the greatest, more than anyone's ever seen. He can't lie believably. He's the worst liar I've ever seen.
Oh, absolutely. And since we're talking about the moderator, how well do you think Kristen Welker did?
I thought she was good. She cut off Trump when he was trying to talk over her. She wouldn't just let him go. And most of the time,
and she got help too. I mean, she had like the idea of the mics being muted at least for the first 2 minutes.
Yeah, I did think it was funny though. Most of the time, she was just trying to say, and now we'll turn it over to President Trump and see what and he just kept trying to talk over her. Like, she's clearly trying to ask you what your response is. And you're like, no, let me respond. She's trying to say the words. Just let her talk. But that's where he needs to just calm down and pay attention to what's going on around him. But again, he's incapable. He's a little kid.
I do think for sure this was the best moderated debate, even including the VP debate as well. It's just so much nicer to see actual policy being discussed, even if it was complete and total garbage.
This is the way I would like to see debates in the future, is much more policy focused. This should have been the first debate. Then we could have gotten into more foreign policy and have the town hall as well. Maybe in the future they'll learn from this and program accordingly.
And of course, we have to mention Amy Coney Barrett has now been confirmed and sworn into the Supreme Court.
Does she have to wear the handmaid uniform, or is she going to wear robes, you think?
I legitimately couldn't figure out the best answer to do it because I was trying to think of, well, is she going to go off of her very authoritarian religion? Or she can go off the hardcore conservative, I have my own freedom. I couldn't think about which one would actually supersede the other.
She should wear the robes with that little bonnet hat, I think. That's a good compromise.
I did see like a fun little meme about turning your clocks back for daylight savings time with her saying, well, turn your clocks back to at least 1923.
She'll be there probably for the rest of my life.
For a long time. But we already knew this was going to happen. It's very sad, but it is what it is. I hate that Trump coined that saying now. I'm so angry because I used to say that way before he did. But I mean, it's true.
Ruined it.
It is what it is. We already expected this.
You also used to say that you did more for the black community than any other president.
I really did, like all the time.
It's just killed both of those things for you.
You know, he really made being a racist Nazi uncool, man.
It's like when you see your dad smoking.
We already knew this was coming. Yes, it's sad that she's going to now be in RBG's quarters, but elections have consequences. That's what Trump said in his opening line of the first presidential debate. Elections have consequences. So go vote, and let's make sure that Joe Biden wins.
We need to take back the White House, take back the Senate, and then we'll have 83 new liberal justices on the Supreme Court, and everything will be okay again. So what do you think, Joe? Do you think that now Biden is going to have to say whether he's going to, quote unquote, pack the court, correct? He said he would wait until the hearing.
He's not going to say anything until after the election.
You don't think so?
No, not at all. Why would he even take the risk?
Well, he said he would. I think it's going to look bad for him now if he pushes it off any further.
Yeah, but I think at this point, people just don't care. Just don't make a news story out of it. You're already going to piss off the conservatives. Go ahead, make the conservatives mad. Talk about how shifty and shady you are because you're not going to answer the question before the election, and let 90% of people just go vote based on what they already know. Don't put any surprises in October.
What do you think he should do?
As far as like actually packing the court?
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Pack the court, man.
How many do you think they should go up to?
I would actually like 15. I see much more likely to be 11.
I think I was kind of looking into this a little bit, and I think they could make a case for it to be 13, because the reason we had 9 to begin with is because that's how many circuits there were. And now it's not the same setup as it used to be, but what they were basing it on then, there is actually 13 federal appellate circuits. So it would actually make sense that we would raise it from 9 to 13 just to match the appellate courts.
My only concern is packing the court, or, I mean, yes, that phrase is already canonically bad, but the idea of actually adding more justices to the Supreme Court is pretty unpopular. What I do actually see happening much quicker is putting limitations on the justices and not having lifetime appointments anymore. Because I think it was something along the lines of like 70% of people want limitations on the Supreme Court. I mean, I'd be okay with that too.
Does that set up some kind of weird chess where you look at how far down the road everyone's going to hit their term limits and when you're going to exactly nominate somebody? I don't know what that does strategically.
I would say, yeah, you could foresee that, but I would say at the end of the day, it would be no more political than anything else, especially right now.
I definitely think we're past judges aren't political.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's a good thing, too, because the whole idea of judges being just these neutral umpires calling balls and strikes is complete bull to begin with. They already have biases going in, and that's okay. We just got to make sure that they temper those biases as much as possible.
Left wing, we're going left wing all the way.
Our special guest is an author, speaker, podcast host, and Halloween enthusiast. By the way, man, we're really going to have to talk about this candy corn thing you have going on, so put a pin in that as well. He is the host of the Thinking Atheist podcast. His books include Deconverted, A Journey from Religion to Reason, Sacred Cows, a lighthearted look at belief and tradition around the world, Ghost Stories, Original Tales and Ghostly Urban Legends on audiobook, perfect for Halloween right now, wink wink, and his newest book, Confessions of a Former Fox News Christian. Please welcome to the show, Seth Andrews. How you doing, man?
Thanks for having me on. I'm doing well, considering this quote-unquote new normal that we're dealing with. But yeah, I'm doing just fine. Thanks for asking.
And his voice is now reminding everyone listening that he's a professional and we're not.
Right, exactly. Smoothest voice.
You're very kind.
Heard.
Thank you.
Yeah, Seth, basically, we really wanted you on here to talk about your newest book that just released. And that would be more so of your experience growing up as a fundamentalist Christian, how that influenced your politics, and then how you eventually switched to today. So you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I was raised an evangelical, by fundamentalist parents. I had kind of the best of all Protestant denominations. My dad was ex-Lutheran. He was much more conservative. My mother was Pentecostal, so she had the speaking in tongues thing going on, and went to a Baptist school. And so, but I mean, Protestant Christianity was a second language. We did Christian things. We went to Christian church. We listened to Christian music. We wore the Christian T-shirts, went to Christian concerts, etc. And this was our normal, you know. And it was so intense that even those Sundays when we didn't end up going to church, Mom would make us sit in the living room and watch services on television for several hours. You know, talk about, it's kind of Orwellian when I think back on it. You know, we're sitting there on the carpet waiting for the indoctrination episode to finish so we can get on with the rest of our day. But in my mind, there was no question that the Christian God was the correct God, the only God. The Bible was absolutely true, and heaven and hell existed, and the United States was one nation under God, my God specifically. And, you know, this had started early in me. When I was in fourth grade, I went to a private school, and they had us in uniforms that were the colors of the American flag, red, white, and blue. We had American flags along with Christian flags all around us. So this was this constant sort of God and country narrative being pounded into our young skulls. And I carried that with me into adulthood. And, you know, I was that guy. I was a Rush Limbaugh listening, Glenn Beck. Well, Glenn Beck wasn't around, I think, till the 90s. But, you know, Michael Savage and that kind of stuff. I read Ann Coulter books, and I was extremely tribalistic for evangelical conservatives. And as a result, when Fox News launched in 1996, I mean, I was all over it. Oh, you know what? Finally, there's a network for us, the true Americans, you know, the God-fearing conservative Americans who truly love this country, unlike everybody else. They're all a bunch of traitors, you know. And so I wanted, with the book, to sort of reverse engineer that, to take a look at where that came from, what informed it, where Fox News came from, why it's so different than other news outlets on the dial, and to sort of relate that to what we're seeing in the modern day. You know, here in 2020, it's, you know, this God and country narrative and this insular look at the United States against the rest of the world, against reality, against science and the data. And, you know, I thought it might be a relevant topic. So, you know, the book's been well received. I'm really proud of it. It's out in print and digital and audiobook format. So,
yeah, and I really liked, so Jason and I both read your book, and we thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you.
My big thing is I really liked how it humanized conservatives. I mean, because we live in such a polarizing time right now where we see each other as almost monsters on the other side of the aisle.
Yeah.
So I really liked how you kind of brought it up, not necessarily as, you know, oh my God, these people are absolutely insane, or they just are stupid, or whatever it is. You actually go into detail on various issues like guns, as you said, like love for the country, and then even like things like abortion and the death penalty and things like that as well. So how do you see like a lot of your, I'm assuming you have a lot of friends and family who are still like this.
Yeah.
I know your parents are included in that. So how did that kind of influence in you really humanizing and empathizing with this type of mindset, even though you switched over to being a much more liberal today?
Well, it's, you know, it's been harder. You know, I mean, there's a phenomenon that psychologists call motive attribution asymmetry. And what this is a tendency for us to declare that we're perfectly right, and then the person who is in opposition to us, ideologically, philosophically, whatever, they are the worst people in the universe. And I think that informs some of how we see many people in my fellow camp, my fellow leftists, you know. They talk about Republicans, they just scream Nazi right off the bat because they're the worst people in the universe. And I do think that, you know, there are people out there who display those traits and tendencies and attitudes, but, you know, we can't put everybody in that sandbox. And, you know, there are people who believe they're genuinely doing the right thing. I mean, we see it in religion. When I talk about my former faith of Christianity, the people used to be, and I used to see a lot more of it. It's less today, but in atheist activism, religion is a mental illness, and that's just crap. You know, religious people are all mentally ill. You know, religion's an idea. It's not mental illness. It's just such a bad argument, but it's a way for them to look down from the high mountain and sort of paint everybody with this brush. And so throughout my activism as an atheist, I've tried to paint the believer in 3 dimensions. I know a lot of believers. They're beautiful. Most of them are beautiful people. They would, pull over on the side of the road. If they saw you had a flat tire, they'd give you a hand. They'd give you the shirt off their back. They're charitable. They love to laugh. They love their families. We disagree about a great many things, but they don't fit into this caricature that I think we want to put everybody into. And so the same is true, I think, with political conservatives. I mean, we'll see the extremes, and I get totally frustrated with these guys driving around with their Confederate flags in the air, honking their horns. And, they've got this tremendously toxic view of the United States. And many of them are bigots, be it white supremacy or they're anti-LGBT or they're blind nationalists. They have sort of a cult-like allegiance to the country, America, right or wrong. I mean, those people exist. And there are other people who are single-issue voters. So for them, they have been programmed by their religion to believe that abortion kills a beating heart or a soul, an eternal soul. So they believe they're fighting to protect life. And so they become a single issue voter on the abortion question. And, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of reasons. Business owners have bought into the idea that all Democrats simply want to tax them into oblivion. And, then you've got other people, they have really ignorant notions of what democratic socialism is. So anybody who screams Democrat/socialist, that is a fear word. That's a scare word that sends them off. Meanwhile, they're using democratically socialist benefits all the time, whether it's taxpayer-funded infrastructure, roads, highways, public libraries, government offices, police, fire, public schools, etc., completely unaware of the irony. And it's hard. It's hard for us to humanize the opposition sometimes because I think we do see this as a war. We see it as a moral fight. And in many cases, we do see them as the enemy of good. They're working against the protection of our fellow human beings. They're working against the Constitution, the rule of law, basic decency. And we get frustrated, and I'm guilty of that. I mean, more and more this year, I have found myself without patience when it comes to many of the people who are gleefully defending the current administration, and it's just stomping all over the Constitution, the rule of law, and my fellow Americans of all shapes and stripes and colors and cultures. I see it as a cult. There is a strong authoritarian thing that's going on. I think much of that is primed by religion. When you are part of a culture that's used to talking about the chosen one and kings and divinely appointed authority, then you are more likely to line up behind somebody who shouts the name of God and wraps themselves in in-group symbols like the flag and the pages of the Bible and screams the name of God and everybody cheers. You're already primed to say, well, that's an authority, and I rally behind the authority because that authority is appointed by God. I want to be godly. This sort of religious thinking has informed much of MAGA culture, I think. So I forgive the long answer, but I think there are about 1,000 gears in the machine, and no one solution, I think, exists to try to combat it.
So you're in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
What is the current political climate there as we're getting close to the election?
Well, I was 3 miles.
That doesn't describe it. I don't know what is.
3 miles from my house, there was a tent. It's a souvenir shop, really. And it's nothing but Trump flags. There's Trump flags. They sell these big flags that say, "Don't tread on me." They have flags that have AR-15 rifles on them. And I saw just the other day, there was a guy who he's driving a pickup truck, and on the back window, they had a logo, and it said Sons of Trump. I've seen one vehicle that had 4 different flags. I think it was an American flag, and then all the rest, I think, were Trump flags. This is a strawberry red state. It is very much that God and country Jesus was a Republican kind of a state. And even though my vote will not be a red vote here in the month of November, I have no illusion that Oklahoma is not, they're going to fall in line behind this sort of evangelical conservative narrative out there. And sadly, the white Christian nationalist, and they believe that the country belongs to them. And they've been primed to be afraid of other people, other ideas. The atheist is a great example. I'm an atheist, and they have been primed to fear me. I'm an anomaly. It's rare that they see an atheist in the wild. So, wait, he's an atheist? What's that like? Where do your morals come from? How do you have any sense of purpose? Blah, blah, the same questions that we've heard 1,000 times. So, it's hard. Part of me gets frustrated and would love to move to, the east or west coast. And part of me takes a measure of satisfaction being a heathen liberal in the middle of Jesus Town, because I think it's healthy for people to know that we exist. I think it helps to humanize. When they get to know me, and hey, Seth's a nice guy. And yeah, we play tennis with him every Wednesday night. And we went out to dinner and we had a great time. Seth had a lot of great stories and he loves his wife and he seems to have a, pretty centered, grounded kind of thing going on. And then they find out I'm an atheist. It's a whole lot harder to put me in a box. They can't discard the label because they've already been introduced to the human being. And that's when conversations begin, and that's when minds begin to expand. And so that part of living in Oklahoma I have found beneficial and refreshing. It is one of the reasons I'm glad I'm still here.
And in the book, you talk about your political views being informed from humanism. So your becoming an atheist, I'm guessing, is what led to humanism. And then from there, your current political beliefs. Is that accurate?
Yeah, sometimes people ask me, well, which did you leave first? Political conservatism or religion? And of course, religion was what I left first. And then once I escaped Christianity and started looking around going, hey, wait a minute, hang on just a second. How much of what I felt about the world was informed by my religion? How did I get here? What provided the foundation for my opinions? And I was just shocked because I thought, wow, my Christianity informed everything. So now I got to go back to square one. How do I really feel about the role of government? What should government be? What should government do? Do I really believe that the United States is the greatest country on the face of the earth? Have I ever researched that? Like, on what grounds is that claim placed? What metrics support that? Let's go look at it. How do I feel about guns? Yeah, I used to be part of the God and guns culture. What about abortion? If you don't hold to this notion of the soul being magically conjured at the moment of conception, but rather you see, the question of personhood outside that. How do you feel about abortion? And more importantly, the rights of a woman to decide what happens to her own body. How do you feel about right to die issues? It used to be that when somebody was, in great suffering and pain and had a terminal illness, I used to think, well, they don't get to pull the plug on their own life because that's a God choice. They're playing God. But if you walk away from superstition, and you begin to see the importance of bodily autonomy, then you have to look at right to die issues, death with dignity, in a whole new light. The immigrants, the other people of other religions. Point by point by point by point, I was going back and I realized that, I have to reevaluate this from a human rights perspective and, good for goodness sake perspective. Gay marriage. Well, there would have been a time when I would have been like, well, God destroyed the Sodomites in the Old Testament. God disagrees at the very least with non-heterosexual coupling. And if you walk away from that and you begin to see consenting adults who are sharing life together and you see the commonality of non-heterosexuality throughout the animal kingdom, far beyond the human primate, and you realize that it's normal. It's just, it's healthy and it's normal and it's fine and it's none of my business if I don't recreate myself in that way. So what? And so, now I can stand on the other side, the humanistic side of LGBT rights and say, I can be an advocate for you. I always like to say to religious people who get all huffy about homosexuals, I like that line that says, look, if gay marriage threatens the marriage of you or your spouse, then one of you is gay. And I love that line, right? Look, if these people sharing life and being partners sexually or otherwise, if that's a threat to you, then one of you is probably gay. And I stand by that. Religion, fundamentalist religion is really a shame culture. It's a control culture. So if you can control sexuality, you've got identity, you've got most of the rest of their lives. And, they want to control how you come into this world, how you go out of this world, how you vote, how you worship, what denomination you align yourself with. They want to control the government policy, certainly the courts. The Supreme Court is another great example. So, walking away from that and looking at it from a human perspective, for me, it was an eye-opening experience, and it changed. It changed almost everything about me.
Yeah, I think similar story was for me as well, where when I started going into more, we'll say, secular books and secular YouTube shows and things like that, I really started evaluating my own beliefs as well. And my big thing was the idea of like this radical individualism that we have in America, where, at the end of the day, it's your choice to do something bad. Or if something is bad for you, it's because it's your fault. And it wasn't until I really started shedding my religion, until I started looking at the idea of free will and concepts like that, to make it seem like, oh, we actually should look at these other forces that are enacting on us at the same time. But one thing I really wanted to ask you about is you brought up the idea of the LGBT community and the religious rights opposition to that. I apologize because I can't remember if it was in your newest book or not, but I do remember you talking about a story when one of your lifelong friends came out to you as gay, and you initially reacted really badly to that, and you had to kind of reconcile that eventually and apologize. You want to tell us a little bit about that and how, what you were going through when you first found out he was gay when you were a conservative Christian?
Yeah. It was the second to last chapter in my book, Confessions of a Former Fox News Christian. I also did a speech about this. You find it on YouTube. Just search Seth Andrews, The Mystery Letter. That's the name of the speech.
That's the one.
In the mid-'90s, my best friend of 10 years, we'd met in high school, sent me a letter, and, he was living in Dallas at the time, and he just sort of came clean. And in the letter, he announced that he was gay. And I did not see that train coming. I had no idea. I mean, it was just totally out of the blue. And, I was primed to see him as the other. I othered my best friend. So, I didn't process it well, and I didn't respond well. It cost us a year of our friendship, and it was my fault. And it took me a year to figure out that my life was better with Corey in it, and I missed him terribly. And so, I reached back out, and he was extremely gracious and forgiving, and we recultivated that friendship, and we remain friends today. It's been 30-some years, and he's just a precious, beautiful human being. And that may have been one of the first times that I ever consciously decided to discard part of my religion. Because the Bible's pretty clear. I don't care what, the more progressive Bible preachers say, the Bible doesn't condemn homosexuality. And I'm like, what Bible are you quoting from? Because any cursory look at Scripture, God is just a monster to LGBT people. And I, in my own life, I had to go through and just decide I'm going to ignore that or reject it. I'm not going to hold to that. I'm a devout Christian. I believe in the Bible. I believe in Jesus. I believe all this stuff. But I'm going to just take all these anti-gay verses and I'm just going to kind of white out. I'm going to take them out, excise them from the Bible. I'm just not going to worry about them because, quite frankly, they're either wrong, morally wrong, or I would rather have Corey in my life and deal with God on the issue later. And it really was, I think, the first time I consciously crossed out part of my faith, fundamental tenet of my faith. And that may have planted the seeds which later on grew into a harder examination of the rest of my religion. I didn't realize that. Somebody actually mentioned it to me. Do you think that, your acceptance of Corey helped to inform the journey that you took much later? And I think that may be the truth. My life is better with Corey in it, and that remains true today.
Well, and it definitely humanizes the idea too, where, I mean, that's where a lot of people will say the best way to change someone's mind is to expose them to the people around it, right? So, like, even if it's just something more mundane, like from going from progressive to liberal, you put them in like a big city with a bunch of progressives, they're eventually going to start changing their mind, not maybe like all the way, but at least to moderate levels. And one thing I really wanted to ask you about, because you talked about Trump and how this connected to Trump, and we unfortunately can't have a politics show without talking about Trump. Less than a week, people, less than a week. Oh my God, please vote him out. Oh my God. One thing I've always been fascinated by with talking about how people aren't necessarily crazy or stupid is their fanatic relationship with Trump, especially the evangelicals. So I know we were talking about before how it's like a cult. I know you had Stephen Hasen on before. I read both his books, The Cult of Trump and Combating Cult Mind Control, which I highly recommend as well. And they do a really good job at showing how people can get influenced into political cults like Trump. So what I want to know is, how do you think evangelicals who have this weird but somehow very objective and solid moral code end up falling in love with Trump?
Well, I think there are a lot of gears in that machine. I'd mentioned authoritarianism. I think the fact that the Republican Party specifically has become infected with evangelicals. You know, we've got the Evangelical Advisory Board, and we've got Barr speaking at the National Association of Broadcasters, and Pompeo doing the interview on the Christian Broadcasting Network about how God may have raised up Donald Trump like Queen Esther to protect the Jews, God's people. I mean, this religious narrative plays really well to a culture that is not exactly primed for critical thinking. They hear God, Bible. I mean, they see Donald Trump and his minions. They tear gas the protesters so that he can stand in front of a church he does not attend to hold up a Bible he does not read. Well, this plays well to a specific demographic because, oh, look, my God, my Bible. And for them, that's the beginning and the end of the conversation. I also think that the Republicans have done a very effective job of demonizing the Democratic Party. We see this with conspiracy theories like the ones put out by QAnon, right? The Democrats are not just people who disagree philosophically about how we approach the future. The Democratic Party is in league with the devil. QAnon's theory is that, or their claim is that the Democratic Party and the Hollywood elite, etc., are all part of a cabal, this big Illuminati-esque pedophile ring that's a precursor to the apocalypse, And so they have othered the Democrat, and so they throw out these scare words. Socialism is a great example. And, they just throw this out, and they have created an environment where people hear that and they just freak out and shut down. And then they excuse and they say, well, no matter how many times Donald Trump lies, no matter how predatory he is, and no matter how much a bigot he is and how much corruption there is, and it doesn't matter what a sociopath he is, at least he's not a Democrat. And that's been an effective strategy among the devout Republican. And there's a guy, his name is, I think, Frank Lutz. He's a Republican strategist who a few decades ago began helping the Republicans with their marketing message. And so, if you go and you say poor people or the impoverished or those who are having a hard time, that's one thing. But if you say the parasites and the takers and the welfare queens, well, that elicits a totally different response. If you say energy exploration, well, that sounds fine. Sounds much better than drilling for oil or drilling our lands. They find ways to say things for good or for ill that elicit an emotional response in the public. And this has certainly been the case. You can just go out in front of a crowd of anybody here in Oklahoma, people who are using democratically socialist programs all the time, but you say the word socialist, and everything else stops. Their mind shuts down, their jaws will square, and they wave their flags and say, never, not ever, not ever, 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 ever. And so then their only other option is Donald Trump, because at least he's not a Democrat, at least he's not a socialist. I also think, and forgive the long answer, I talk about this in my book, there has been a demonization that started actually, well, it's been going on for hundreds upon hundreds of years, but back in the mid-1900s, in the mid-20th century, we saw Eisenhower during the time when we were in the Cold War against Soviet Russia. And what we had done is we had demonized Russia, and we'd said that they're satanic, and we added under God to the pledge and put it on our paper money. And, we started to really speak in religious terms because we were setting the United States off against the evil other. And of course, the evil other also happened to be communist. So communist, and then they aligned that with socialist and Marxist, and all of that is in league with the devil. That's carried over, 70 years some later, 70 some years later, it's carried over. And, the residuals of that are that people don't just have a disagreement about how to solve the problems. They are in league with the devil. And as a result, you can justify a vote or your support for an awful person because the Lord sometimes uses terrible people to do great things. I think it's a tap dance. It's an apologetics kind of tap dance, but they've done it with their religion. It makes sense they would do it politically as well.
Yeah, that's certainly true. Joe's a little bit younger, but I grew up in the 80s during the Cold War, and I still do have that reflexive tick whenever I hear communism.
Yeah.
That's my first thought is, Ivan Drago from Rocky.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not a communist. I'm not a National Socialist guy, but I'm just, to look at it fairly. And you realize that a lot of the people who are saying that they want a living wage, or they want, a standard median income, at least to start, or they want to try to level the playing field in some way because it really is a stacked deck. I mean, that's not evil. I think that's just basic common sense. And so why can't we talk about those things? Why can't we explore those things? And we talk about healthcare. Other first world nations, they've got healthcare that's part of the infrastructure of their systems, of their countries. And here, people are like, well, if it goes to the government, it's all going to be corrupt. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. There's no corruption in privatized healthcare? Well, it'll be too expensive. It's not too expensive with privatized healthcare. And when did we, as a citizenship, decide that healthcare was off the table because we provide services in so many other areas, be it education or our streets and highways, public protection, police, fire, etc. I think healthcare should be part of how a civilization or a society takes care of its members. We have a responsibility. We'll carry a fair measure of a tax burden for it, and we also get to reap the benefits. And I used to be afraid of a nationalized healthcare system, and now I think it's just common sense. But if you are a MAGA Republican, well, nationalized healthcare, that means socialism, that means the devil. And so you just hold up your flag and you scream freedom and you stop the conversation right there.
And how much of that is the responsibility of Fox News and those right-wing conservative talk show hosts? That's all you heard, right? The death panels and everything else.
Well, actually, I want to even jump in before you say anything because that is exactly what it was. Where, I mean, I go back to what Pete Buttigieg said in one of the first two primary debates where he said, it doesn't matter who wins. They're going to paint us as socialists anyway. And you can see that, right? Where, I mean, Joe Biden is this person that no one on the left wanted, yet they're still trying to paint him as this radical socialist guy who's going to take over everything.
Yeah, and they use fear to motivate people against him. They say Biden wants open borders. And you're like, actually, no. Biden has never endorsed or advocated open borders. Biden wants to raise taxes on everybody. And I'm like, well, if you make over $400,000 a year, you may have a greater tax burden. But I'm looking at my own bank statements and the bank statements of pretty much everybody I know. It doesn't affect us, right? It's a proportional thing. I also think, I have a difficult time with Trumpers because Biden's not a good candidate. I'm sorry. He's the best we got.
You're preaching to the choir, man.
He what? He's the best we got. Like that's the guy we're putting. And so I have that. But, at the same time, when I look at Biden, I see he's kind And he genuinely cares about people. I don't care what the naysayers say. My impression is I'm absolutely convinced that he does care about his fellow human beings, and he does have a kind heart, and he does want goodness to prevail. And if you want to go back to the freaking 80s and 90s and pull out something that he's done, you can knock yourself out. But I'm talking about Biden today. It's a hugely problematic and unimpressive candidate relative to so many of the others that I would have rather seen in there. But if you stand him against the sociopath, the malignant narcissist, the president as king, Donald Trump, the truth of the moment guy, the inciter, the bigot, the man who is cruel because he enjoys being cruel, this is a no-brainer. You know, I like to tell people that if Donald Trump is us, then shame on us. Like, well, I like him because he's strong. Well, no, actually, he's not strong. He's just a bully. He's the weak person's idea of what strength would be. You know, he likes to shoot the cuffs and throw his chest out. But the truth is, he's an empty shell of a human being. He has no soul. He has, if you'll pardon the expression, he has no soul. He has no center. He needs constant adulation and adoration, which explains all the rallies where mostly instead of going out and talking about how other people's lives can be improved and why we should be concerned about the downtrodden and raise the tide that raises all ships, instead, he just essentially masturbates. He just talks about how great he is. You know, I'm the greatest, me, I'm the greatest, and then he basks in the applause. And, you know, to watch that happen, to me, I'm ashamed. It makes me ashamed to my core that we allowed it. And the truth is, if Donald Trump loses the presidential election, we're still stuck with the tens of millions of people who loved and enabled him, who remain. Statistically, they are diminishing, but they're diminishing slowly. They will not go quietly. Many of them are armed. And I'm scared. You know, they're already primed to scream coup and conspiracy if Donald Trump doesn't win the election. And are they going to take to the streets? Are they going to start banging on governors' doors again? Is something else going to happen? Are they going to go off and try to declare their own little nation? I mean, I'm genuinely concerned.
I legitimately actually don't know. We kind of talked about that in previous episodes. And yeah, it's horrifying and scary, especially when you see Trump actively like egging these people on.
Yeah.
So when you constantly see, and you, even like with, and you can talk about the Proud Boys stand back and stand by thing, sure, it's fine too. But when you say every single time, will you at least have a peaceful transition, they immediately go into, well, it's a rigged election. Constantly, every single time. And then when you have people who will automatically assume that we're going to have the answers on election night in one of the most crazy years that we've ever had in history, I think that's just, you know, pouring gas onto the fire and Trump's just lighting a match.
And if he loses, right, he's got 8 weeks to screw us over. I mean, he is going to go wild. Part of me thought he would just disappear because his ego couldn't take it. But I think now if he loses, there'll be 150 tweets a day instead of 100. And he is going to wreck this place before he leaves. He's going to trash the dorm room before he is removed from the premises because he doesn't care about other people. It's, you know, if he only cares about himself and he enjoys cruelty, and he does, you know, this is hugely problematic. Now back to Fox News and the right-wing conduit. It's interesting because I think Fox News feeds on and feeds into a specific demographic. Right, they've tapped into the audience of the angry white male and the paranoid evangelical. These people are seeing the demographics of the country changing, fundamentally changing. 26% of Americans these days, they identify as non-religious, not necessarily atheist, but religion doesn't really play a meaningful role in their lives. They're seeing a greater diversity of color and culture, other religions, other traditions, other opinions. And so the white evangelical Protestants, conservative, whatever, and they look at that and they think, wait a minute, we've had the head seat at this table for a long time. And these people, they're starting to outnumber us. So now the power grab starts. Now it's, you know, fear language, and it's getting more zealots on the highest courts in the land, and it's trying to change the laws and executive orders and et cetera, because that's all they've got. I think they realize that the United States of the decades ahead is not going to look like the United States of our ancestors, of our parents and grandparents, and that scares them. I don't know how much it's going to change in my lifetime, but I do hope, I'd like to say I believe, but I really do hope that the United States is genuinely more of a representative republic in the decades ahead. It has a greater diversity of ideas. It is not treated like a church. And it has adopted more of a xenophilic, humanistic attitude toward people from within and without.
And I was going to ask you about that as well. I mean, as we try to move forward, I can't even imagine saying this, but whether or not Trump wins this next week, how do we move forward as a country, and what role would religion play in that? Do you think there's a way of reforming Christianity? Do you think we have to kind of urge people to still throw it all away completely and go secular, or what do you think would be the best way to move forward as a country?
I'd rather deal with a moderate, casual, cultural believer than a fundamentalist. I can say that pretty easily. My biggest gripes aren't with somebody who throws God out in casual conversation and maybe goes to church twice a year and, it's lip service, but they're not interested in being a bigot. They're not interested in turning the government into a church. It's just kind of, God is like the decoration. God's the wallpaper. Those people, that more moderate, kind of casual, cultural believer, I think we're going to see a lot more of those people. And I think the fundamentalists, we're seeing this within the church now, the Bible literalists, they're becoming fewer and fewer. This sort of weird Calvinistic, we are all born broken kind of a message. We all deserve hell. That was the church of our ancestors. But these days, the popular churches, they are the Joel Osteen megachurch type models, the life church model, where really mostly they talk about how you are somebody and life is great and, Jesus is love, and it's more of a raw, positive type of thing. Because people don't want to go to church to hear how they were born with original sin and deserve torture. They want to go and be empowered and have community, and churches are having to evolve. You want proof of evolution, just look at the Christian church, because if you were to be in one of these mega churches, Joel Osteen and his ilk were to go back several hundred years and try to preach these types of messages to the masses, they would be burned as heretics.
Oh, definitely.
But these days, Christianity has had to moderate itself. And I think Christianity is going to have to adapt if it's going to survive. So the Christianity of our future, probably it's going to be a little more of a happy, clappy, Tony Robbins, you are somebody special and Jesus loves all the little children kind of thing. And there will be less fundamentalism. Religion, this is kind of a diversion, but I think as long as there is hopelessness and suffering in the world, there will always be religion. I think there will always be people who are holding to a supernatural answer and a better life in the clouds because this life sucks. If they are broken in body, if they are diseased, they look forward to having a whole body in heaven. If they're poor here, they look forward to jewels in their crowns. If they have all this crime and misery and hopelessness going on now, they look to even a manufactured happy ending. And in that way, religion will continue its appeal. So this is one of my arguments for being a humanist. Let's solve each other's problems now, because the more people are cared for, the more our problems are eradicated here on earth, the less inclined our fellow human beings are going to be to rely on these sort of manufactured happy endings rooted in superstition.
And I really like that answer too. I always try to tell people that I have much more in common with a liberal Christian than I do with a conservative atheist.
Yeah.
And at least for me, it's not necessarily about, whether or not you have to believe or not believe in God. I mean, I don't know, at least for me, I guess if you asked me 4 or 5 years ago, I guess it could have been a much more stringent answer, because that's when I was going through my more, I could say, hardcore atheist phase. But nowadays, it's just, what do you want to see other people have? How do you want to treat other people? What outcomes do you want to happen? How is your religion influencing your life? And if you believe in God and you want to go to church, but you believe that people should have these specific rights, you think you should fight for these social justice issues, you think you should really care about other people and they should have a right to live, okay, fine. I really don't mind then at that point. It's just, I just want to know what you're doing with your religion at the end of the day. So I really did like your answer there.
Well, I think, too, it depends on, attitudes inform actions. So if you believe in a fundamentalist religion and you're brainwashing your kids to feel like they're born broken and they deserve to be tortured in hell unless they drop to their knees and invite in Jesus and commit the rest of their lives, I oppose that. You're damaging children. I think it's a form of child abuse. If you believe that the government belongs to your God, that's going to result in how you vote and what you support. But if somebody holds a God belief and it's an internal thing and it doesn't result in them trying to force other people into their cookie cutter, I am less inclined to have a problem with them. I think my problem is more with the people who are outwardly trying to broadcast and co-opt the culture for their own ends.
Certainly. One question I did have for you, as we both come from a atheist community that essentially collapsed when the organization we were a part of became a conservative political group, do you think, because there is a divide, I feel, in the atheist community between the conservatives and the more liberal side, do you think we can ever get past that and go back to kind of the way it was 5-6 years ago, where the atheist community was a little bit more united and more working to a common goal instead of constantly fighting over our differences?
I think lining us up, it's hard. You've got a culture that prides itself on independent thought and not being a sheep and not being part of the herd, and I'm going to do my own thing. And, we share this rejection of any belief, and we don't have a God belief, so that's what we have in common, but the rest of our lives are kind of in play. And I think, you're going to see there are going to be horrible atheists and wonderful atheists. They're going to be productive and unproductive. You're going to see bigoted and humanistic atheists. You're going to find people across the board who wave the atheist banner, and I don't think that's going to go away. I think social media has fostered this eagerness to fight, to win. We've all seen it. Somebody posts a controversial opinion on the internet, and instead of saying, well, I disagree, can we talk about this? The response is, you're evil and F you. We respond with snarky memes. Hell, I've been guilty of that. I'll see Dave Rubin post something stupid and I'll be like, what the hell are you talking about? But we're not really interested in trying to change minds. We're only interested in, I need to make you look stupid or reveal that you're stupid, and then all of my people are going to rally to my side while your people rally to your side, and they all start shouting at each other, so that makes it worse. I have a hard time, I understand a conservative atheist believes that government should be smaller and that it should be less intrusive in people's lives. And maybe they based it on taxation or something. Maybe it's more of a philosophy of how business ought to work. Whether it's misguided or not, it's not rooted in malice. What bothers me is I don't know how any humanist could align itself with American conservatism today, because the deck is stacked so much in the camp of the evangelicals. And so I raise an eyebrow if somebody comes to me and they make these statements like, well, both parties are equally bad. Both philosophies are equally flawed. And they make this false equivalence argument. And I think, well, I don't see that in any way, shape, or form. If the Democratic Party they're not the ones trying to stack the courts with Christian zealots who come out of cultures that make women subservient to men and take away female reproductive choice and believe that gay people are broken in the eyes of God. I mean, that's not a democratic thing, We don't have a malignant narcissist, sociopath, serial liar with a lifelong history of just making his whole story up. I mean, even when Tony Schwartz, who ghost wrote The Art of the Deal, right? Trump's best-selling book, talked about how he succeeded and blah, blah, blah. Tony Schwartz actually wrote that book. And he came forward before the election. He said, I never thought this guy would get where he is. We just were selling books. I made almost everything up. You guys need to know this guy's dangerous. And, nobody cared. The MAGAs didn't care. Well, it's a lie. Well, if he's slick enough to get away with lying, then he's still a winner and God bless America kind of thing, But I mean, it has Biden lied? Yes, sure. Has he been corrupt? Perhaps, yes. Is it equivalent? No. And so, I will always struggle as a humanist with the idea of somebody aligning themselves as an atheist with the Republican Party of today. I don't know how you can justify that. But I do think we should be able to sit at the same table without throwing food at each other. And, I certainly don't like the idea of atheist activists aligning themselves with genuinely terrible people. It hurts everybody. It hurts the movement. It hurts the message. If I was coming out of my faith and I'd stumbled upon a YouTube channel from somebody who was aligned with an alt-right guy or really, really toxic ideas, and that was my first introduction to what godlessness was, who knows where I'd be today. So it's kind of a rambling answer, but my hope is that we could indeed humanize each other, but I don't see us all lining up on the same page. We're going to have a lot of gears in this machine, and they're going to be going in different directions.
No, I think I really like that answer. And now that we're kind of just wrapping up the interview, I just have one more topic I want to cover. And, you were talking about really aligning ourselves with good people and good ethical and moral people. Seth, I swear to God, how do you like candy corn? I am so upset by this, especially when, and for the record, I think you changed your mind on this, but you made me so upset before when you were posting about how much you hated guacamole and hated avocados. And then you posted about how you like candy corn. I am not okay with this.
Well, my wife bought one of these. It's called a molcajete. It's they make these little bowls out of volcanic rock, and she had it ordered out of Mexico. They make them by hand, and she was making homemade guacamole, and she made guac that I actually did like. So there is an exception to the guac rule, but usually I look at it and I think it's the devil's vomit. Candy corn, I like to eat with salty cashews. You get the sweet, you get the salty.
What?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh,
That's
God.
just wax with sugar in it.
Oh,
It's
my
like
God.
eating a candle, but it's sweet and it's yummy, and it's I will die on this hill. It's not my favorite, but those who blaspheme the candy corn, if I was a praying person, I would be praying for your soul, because you are genuinely missing out on the goodness, especially around Halloween.
Where do you stand on Peeps?
We like to put Peeps in the microwave because they explode, but I don't think they taste like food. No.
If you put toothpicks in them, then they fight. It's
Oh my
fun.
God, shut up.
Is that on YouTube? Can I YouTube that? Toothpicks in them?
Oh, I'm sure they like
Oh.
joust because they get big in the microwave.
Oh,
God.
It's a good
So,
time.
well, actually, my one last serious question is, so I know you're a big Halloween advocate. You post your decorations of your house every year, and it's phenomenal usually. And I like the meme one you did this year with like, the kids deserve to die. It changed my mind. So that was really good. And obviously you have the things about the ghost stories coming out with this episode coming out basically right at Halloween time. Just tell us a little bit about how you became so fascinated and beloved with Halloween.
Well, when I first started doing ghost stories in the October podcast, a few people showed up and they're like, why is an atheist activist talking about ghosts? I mean, there's no joy or humor in these people's lives. And I'm like, this is an easy one. I love Harry Potter films. I don't believe in Lord Voldemort. I love the Star Wars films, the original trilogy. I don't believe in the Force. We can be creatures of imagination, for Pete's sake. And I always loved horror movies, scary movies, even when I was a kid. I was real brave during the day. I'd watch them, and then at night I couldn't sleep a wink because I was terrified, But I was always fascinated by them, and I've always loved them, and I love a good story. And as a podcaster, one of the things I've always wanted to be, as much as anything else, is a storyteller. I want to take people on a journey. Those have always been the best broadcasts that I have enjoyed, is, when people literally suck you into it, to a theater of the mind experience, and you take a journey. And when you do it in audio format, it's amazing, because as you tell the story, that thousands of people are all painting their own unique mental pictures. If a character has a voice, well, the mental picture of that character is a little bit different for everybody. They get a chance to sort of paint the scenery. And audio podcasting, audio storytelling is unique in that way. And so I thought, wouldn't it be fun to do a ghost stories show? We just do nothing but sit around the virtual campfire. I guess it's been 10 years ago we started. And despite the few naysayers at the front end, most everybody else seemed to have a good time. And then a few years after that, I began writing and producing an original work just as a personal challenge. Like, do you think I could pull this off? Do I think I could come up with something compelling? And it took off, and I had enough material compiled, and I wrote some new stuff. I released the audiobook in 2018. It's got 14 total stories to it. And this new one, it's really kind of a college course in sound design. The finale is an original work that came about when I started to get fascinated by these air traffic controller conversations with pilots. There'd be a crisis in the air, and you'd hear them sort of talk everybody through it. And something about this sort of, I don't know, the radio frequency and the static and the voices and whatnot, I thought, well, that might make for a great ghost story. And so that's the theme of this year's broadcast, or that's the climax of that story, which seems to be well received out there. I think, we as human beings are creative people, and I think we are imaginative people. We don't have to believe in ghosts to enjoy stories about ghosts or anything else. And I think, it's like going on a roller coaster. You buckle up, you take the ride, you come out, everybody laughs. You know you were safe the whole time. You didn't believe you were going to die or any of that other stuff. I think, you can suspend disbelief knowing it's a ride. And it's bubblegum for the brain. It's a great distraction. It's part of the human experience. And that's what I hope Ghost Stories is for the audience.
Well, all right. Seth, this was an awesome conversation we had here. Thank you so much for coming on. We really do appreciate it. And if people were to want to look you up, where would they find you?
Well, it's an honor to have been invited. Thank you for that. If you want to find the podcast and the main work, you can go to thethinkingatheist.com. I am not the Thinking Atheist. The Thinking Atheist is an icon which reminds people to reject faith and embrace reason. But thethinkingatheist.com has most of the major content. And if you're more curious about me, links to my books, etc., you can go to my personal website, which is sethandrews.com.
And all of our listeners, if we do ever get a chance to gather in large groups again in the future, if you have the opportunity to go see Seth anywhere, doing any talks or maybe a book signing, do it. He's one of the nicest people, as we were a member of the atheist community for a while, in a group that did speeches and organizations and things like that, conventions.
He came to Milwaukee several times.
And one of the best people that I've ever got a chance to meet. Very nice. I do remember you specifically. You were the one speaker that we had that actually stayed after to help clean up and move chairs. I'll never forget that.
It was an honor to be a part of it. I still have my Milwaukee T-shirt. I wear it all the time. So you guys,
where's your cheese head? That's what I want to know.
I gave it to my grandkid, so he's got the cheese head, but I still have the T-shirt. But no, I appreciate the kind words. When COVID's over, I know we're all aching for the chance to get together again. I'd love a chance to come back to Milwaukee.
Thank you again, Seth. We'll make sure we get all your links down below in the episode. And seriously, have a great rest of the day, guys. And we really appreciate it. I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening. We hope to see you in the next episode. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter at ThinkProPod. You can email us at thinkpropod@gmail.com. And remember, when in doubt, think progressively. I mean, he
Good start.
Thank you. I appreciate it. In our lead story tonight.
Our lead story? And in our lead story. Yeah. Don't know where to go from there.